Welcome to Brews, your go-to podcast for all things AI at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. I'm your host, Daniel Duggin, with a bachelor's in computer science pursuing a master's in computer science. In each episode, we'll talk about the ways AI is revolutionizing education. We'll explore how AI is transforming teaching, learning, and our community. Whether you're a student, an educator, or simply curious about the future of learning, this podcast is for you.
Okay, so my name is Heather Boyd. I'm the Learning Technology Specialist over in the Walker Center. And AI has, for a long time been a big interest of mine. So I've been collaborating with Vicki Farnsworth's team through the AI initiative. And then I've also kind of tried to offer workshops for faculty throughout the past few semesters as we're kind of dealing with this new technology, just to, make sure they're comfortable and have some ideas about kind of what we're looking at moving forward.
I'm Victoria Bryan. I'm the director of the Walker Center. Unlike Heather, AI has not been an interest of mine for a very long time. So, I don't think that I gave a significant thought to artificial intelligence until ChatGPT was released in November of 22. And a faculty member emailed me and said, "What are you going to do about this?" And I said, I don't know. I didn't make it. But it's been really cool to be part of a team over in the Walker Center who's really curious and dedicated to our mission and willing to explore what this means for a lot of different areas, but particularly teaching and learning.
All right, so with being in the Walker Center, do you want to kind of go into a little bit of detail of what you guys do over there? I know you work with Brett Fuchs, correct?
No, we're actually separate from Brett Fuchs.
Okay.
Now, I adore Brett Fuchs, and I think he does phenomenal work. The Walker Center's full title is the Walker Center for Teaching and Learning. And so our charge is to work with faculty on things like learning technologies, the learning management system, Canvas, that we use, pedagogy, questions of effective teaching, innovative teaching, different teaching, and then we can also get into questions of the more holistic academic life. We try to put together workshops, resources, peer groups that will support that kind of thing. We've also done programming on burnout post-COVID or, utilizing learning technologies in your pedagogy, right? So a lot of crossover and a lot of expansive, I think, holistic work.
Awesome. So Heather, we'll start with you. So I know you talked about you've put together workshops that kind of help faculty learn about what AI is, how to use it. Do you kind of want to go into detail about that and maybe talk about some of the challenges that have arisen? Maybe faculty not necessarily being interested, maybe them thinking, okay, it's AI, keep it away from me, or maybe faculty experiences that are a little bit more positive.
Yeah, so it's a little interesting. I offer a number of workshops. My AI ones are always the most attended. I always have more people at those. And when they come in, you kind of have this wide degree of knowledge and use among those attendees. So it's bridging that gap and trying to make sure that you're addressing the needs of everyone. So in my work, what I've tried to do is kind of create staggered workshops. So I have what I call Gen AI 101 and then Gen AI 201 kind of thing. And you just kind of have to meet faculty where they are. This is a big, scary technology. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have to sympathize with that. And then many of them come from backgrounds that are not technology. They have no, IT whatsoever embedded in their field. So you kind of have to make the language accessible, be open to having conversations and addressing questions along the way, and just kind of let them feel their way into this. So that's kind of been my approach along the way.
And how's that been going so far as feedback from faculty in those workshops?
Yeah, I think it's been going well. Everybody typically thanks me afterwards. I'll sometimes get a few emails afterwards. And those who have attended one, typically they'll attend the next session that I do. So it's always encouraging to see, okay, well, they must have gotten something out of that session if they've decided to return for this next session. So it has been going well, I do believe.
So I have a note here that says you're a grad student who helps with syllabus creation. Do you kind of want to talk about maybe some of the, maybe not necessarily challenges, but maybe discussions that go into creating a syllabus now versus maybe a few years ago before ChatGPT kind of came on the scene?
So, of course, the syllabus is experiencing some changes. And I think that what we have to do is make sure we define acceptable use for our students within our syllabus. We can't kind of leave them guessing, because then if they violate what we believe is an acceptable use, we haven't outline that parameter for them. So I think be as clear as you can in your syllabus statements around Gen AI. There have been some offered up by the Office of Student Conduct that are very good. Use those, adapt those. There are even faculty that on individual assignments will delineate, okay, you can use ChatGPT for this. I ask that you do this with it, and then cite, how you used it. That's really common and encouraged. But then there's this degree of now you can actually use ChatGPT to help you write a syllabus, right? So that is something that you can use ChatGPT standard for, but there are even specialized tools out there now that will help you kind of develop those things. Approach it like you would tell a student to approach Gen AI. Don't take everything it gives you at face value. Take what this tool has given you and make sure it's applicable to your specific circumstance. Make sure anything in it is factual. There's no hallucinations or anything. But use it to help you streamline your work. There's nothing wrong with that. So, it's a double-edged sword when it comes to syllabus. Yeah, address acceptable use, but you can use the tool too to streamline things.
So another thing that we've talked about in the Walker Center, and I think Heather has been instrumental in us thinking through this, is like at some point, not only do we need to put together statements of acceptable use, and not only do we need to think about how Gen AI can help faculty streamline their work, right? Utilizing their expertise, right? I don't think that's expendable, right? That they need to have gone through the training that it takes to teach a class. Right. And all Gen AI is going to do is take out some of the tedium of that work. So not only is there that, but eventually we're also looking at rethinking what our learning objectives are for some courses, and how our disciplines continue to be relevant and necessary and useful and potentially life-changing, right? In an age where generative AI can produce very convincingly human-sounding text, right? And so my disciplinary background is in English, and so when I think about writing like my ideal syllabus now in an age where generative AI is pretty ubiquitous, right? I feel like my learning objectives in a class that require a good deal of writing are going to need to incorporate why my discipline is still necessary, right? Because I very much believe that it is, right? And that teasing out how our learning objectives exist in this world is a necessity. And so I think that changes how we conceptualize what a syllabus communicates to our students.
And with your teaching background being in English, has generative AI coming out changed your approach to how you would go about teaching a class, or are you still kind of routed in the same, I guess, principles you've been following for your entire career?
The reality is that correcting a comma, correcting use of a semicolon, correcting mechanics and grammar, correcting word choice, I mean, that is, you can see it, you can engage with it quickly, you can make reasonable marks on a paper, and it is a valuable skill for students to get, right? The understanding of grammar and mechanics, and you can fall back on that habit. And so what I keep coming back to is, like, if I were to find myself, if I wake up tomorrow and I'm a faculty member in English again and I'm teaching writing constantly, right? If students are turning things in that have been run through Grammarly, which is a generative AI-driven technology, then maybe I'm in a space where I have to deal with their content and their ideas and their organization again, which is really what I should have been doing all along. And so I don't know. That's a very long-winded and theoretical answer to your question. And I guess all of that is to say, I think that there's reason, and I feel that dread that some people do. And I don't know how difficult, because I'm not living that life right now, I don't know how difficult it must be to be trying to teach writing in the way that we've always taught writing for decades, right? with what seems like an impossible to catch shortcut that's available now. That seems awful and really hard. But I could also see this opportunity where I'm rethinking, like, what am I trying to teach in the world of writing now, right? And how do I engage with my students and help them learn that, like, the human nature of what they're doing is still relevant alongside this really powerful tool.
I will say one thing with that is, and Heather, you can probably attest to this too, is if I'm using generative AI to help me with a paper, I will say I can give it relatively bare bone information and it'll spit out something pretty decent. But I feel like a lot of professors, at least now, have kind of adjusted to a point where you can kind of tell how much information a student gave said AI platform. And for me, since I've been working with our AI initiative, my prompts have gotten a lot better. And I will say I think that's something that can definitely help students enhance learning, but I also think that can be something that helps your department, especially seeing, okay, well, even if maybe they did or didn't use AI, but let's just see, how well whatever set topic is covered, this, that, and the other. So that might be something that helps as well.
Yeah. I'm going to stop stealing the mic, I promise. But what you just said, I think, was very exciting to me. Like, I looked at Heather and was like, big eyes. And she was like, what is going on? So you're mentioning, like, essentially prompt engineering, right?
Yeah.
How you're building this prompt. And I'm wondering, like, what kind of assessment do we build in this world that allows us to see student learning in the prompting, right? So
Exactly.
for so long, we've thought of the essay, right, as the assessment of student learning, and for good reason, right? But is there now an opportunity to be able to assess student learning in the conversation with a generative AI tool?
I would say so, no doubt.
Right? And so, I mean, does that change how we're looking at? I mean, I think that there are a lot of ways to understand how students are learning, right? And when this first came out and we're scrambling, we're trying to figure out, like, what do we do now in this brave new world? I think rightfully so, a lot of professors thought, well, I guess I have to do oral exams, right? And for a lot of students, I think that was a great experience, right? I think that there were some cases of professors doing oral exams and students going down a path and the professor being able to, like, give them, like, are you sure you want, and they're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Let me say this other thing. And they end up with a great exam experience. And then some experiences that students had where they can choke because it's just not something that they've ever been trained to do. It doesn't speak to a strength. It's not what they're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But when technology moves that fast and we have to pivot and react, like, we do the best we can with what we've got. And I think that that's where that comes out. All of that to say, given the space to learn and think and reflect on what we're actually trying to do, which is be able to put our stamp on the fact that the students learned what they needed to learn to get the credit for our course. How do we change how we're assessing that now? And that conversation between the student and the generative AI tool might be a really cool way to do that.
So one thing we did talk about on Monday is course curriculum, should it change in a sense? So for me, you can probably relate to this as well. Your freshman year is pretty much a repeat of what you do your junior and senior year of high school. And I understand that it is for us to be well-rounded, and I completely get that. But at the same time, with how fast AI is changing, and especially in the computer science space, do you think there will be or should be a change in curriculum to kind of maybe take that first semester to knock those gen eds out of the way and get you just adjusted to college, and then immediately after that pick up where you need to be, whether it's with AI enhancing your learning, and then just getting you maybe a little bit ahead? Because I really didn't get into computer science that deep until really spring of my junior year, and I'm in my last semester now. So I think that's something that maybe could change. And that's that's in no, like, disrespect to any of our gen ed courses. I just think now with how fast AI is moving that I think there could be change there.
Yeah, so I'm a PhD student at the University of Missouri, and I'm currently taking a course called AI in Higher Education. And this is one of the very first things we actually talked about. And there is, just to kind of give you some background, there are, even before AI, there were these dueling perspectives of what the goal of higher education should be. There is should it prepare students for the workforce? Like, should it prepare them for what they're going to deal with after they graduate? Or is it more about this development of a well-rounded person who can think critically and be a productive member of society? So you have these dueling perspectives already, and then you have AI introduced, right? And so now it's like, well, are we going to stick to this sort of school of thought, or are we going to start to kind of adapt and recognize that they're going to have to deal with this once they step out into the workforce? So you've got to deal with that. To begin with. But all that to say, my perspective is that, we've got to address it. Something that we just recently talked about in my course that I referenced is that, it has applicability in all the fields at this point. Whether it is just loosely related to the content at hand, like anthropology. If you're going to do research, then maybe it can help you with data analysis. That's a loose connection. Or if it's more like computer science, where ChatGPT can spit out some Python code that is beautiful, And so how do we begin preparing students to step out into that and have to begin working with these things? And it is... there are lots and lots of views and opinions on it. And I think that, honestly, for me, that's something that's got to be determined individually by faculty.
Yeah.
It's highly complicated. Something that I have always kind of considered and has been brought back to my attention as of late is this. We don't necessarily, I know it feels like it feels that AI is this adversary, right?
Yeah.
And I get it. But we don't always have to see it that way. I actually wrote a blog post yesterday about a post that was posted on LinkedIn. I believe it was Mauro Winman, where he outlines how we can use AI as a collaborator instead of, trying to steer clear of it. It's this adversary. And something that he said that was particularly poignant was that if we leverage it to do these things that are just monotonous and repetitive and just take up all of our time, then we get back that precious resource of time, right?
Right.
And that is so, so precious, especially in higher ed. We know that faculty are spread thin. And so if we begin to leverage this and recognize its power, it can get us some of that time back, which I think is an interesting thought.
That was
Heather Boyd,
Victoria Bryan,
and I'm Daniel Duggin. Thanks for tuning in. The music in this podcast is by Blue Dot Sessions. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, and until next time, keep learning and exploring the possibilities of AI.